Hello, everybody. Welcome to our program this evening, our virtual program, Being an Informed Voter in 2020. I'm Barb Walter, a librarian in adult services at Longmont Public Library. And assisting me this evening are Josie Brockman and Johannes Letz, also of adult services. Our program is generously sponsored by the Friends of the Longmont Library. To join the Friends and help support the library, please visit their website, friendsofthelongmontlibrary.org. Now a little bit about upcoming programs. Thursday, October 8 at 7 p.m. via WebEx, it's Beer as remedy and scapegoat for illness in antiquity. Join us for an engaging talk with beer archaeologist Travis Rupp of Avery Brewing, exploring how beer relates to pandemics and illness throughout history. And Wednesday, November 4th at 7 p.m. via WebEx again, local ghost hunter Richard Estep will be with us to discuss his latest ghost hunting investigations across America. For more information and to register for these programs, please visit our website, longmontcolorado.gov/library. Now, a few housekeeping details before we begin. First of all, please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. During Sandra's presentation, we'll use the chat function to capture any questions or comments you may have for her. My colleague Johannes will keep track of those and we'll read them to Sandra at the end of her presentation. And then after that, if we still have time, which I think we will, we'll open things up for a bit of live Q&A. Finally, please remember, we're all in this together. Be polite, be respectful, and please refrain from personal attack. Thank you very much. Now for our program this evening. There are so many unprecedented aspects to 2020, but one of the most impactful is the political polarization our country is experiencing going into this election and what that means for our news consumption. Separating false from true and spin from fact gets harder and harder. We're pleased tonight to have independent journalist Sandra Fish here to discuss disinformation in news and social media, why it's there, how to spot it, and also tools to help us locate accurate, reliable information on issues and candidates we'll be voting on in November. Sandra is a Colorado data journalist specializing in politics. She's a 2020 First Draft Fellow working on disinformation and also writes about campaign finance for the Colorado Sun. Her work has appeared on Colorado Public Radio, KUNC, Al Jazeera America, Roll Call, and more. Sandra also teaches data journalism at the University of Colorado Boulder and worked as a full-time instructor there for 8 years. Welcome, Sandra. I'll mute myself and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Barbara. I really appreciate you all inviting me here to talk with folks today. I grew up in a family in a small farm town in Iowa. This is a plate glass from the picture window in our family's farmhouse. And, I developed a real passion for democracy there. My parents were pretty involved in the community. We read newspapers every morning, and at that time, dating myself, in the afternoon, we sat down and listened to Walter Cronkite on the evening news every evening, and we talked about, in our family of 5, about the events of the day and the news, and that's one of the reasons I became a journalist. And I want to share with you some things that I see out there while monitoring disinformation in the state of Colorado, but also some tools that I've created and other people have done that I think will be useful for you, because it's really difficult when people, we are so polarized. And one of the books I've really enjoyed that I've been trying to listen to, I read it for 12 years ago by Farhad Manjoo, who's now at the New York Times, called True Enough, about even then he wrote an entire book about how people you have their own version of reality. We're unable to agree on a common set of facts anymore. And I'm hoping that I can give you some tools to sort of sort those things out, because it's an even bigger problem today than it was then. So let me see if I can do this screen share. Let's see, that's not the one. There we go. All right. So I have these slides. I am working with First Draft. First Draft is actually an international organization. This is the first year they're really doing a lot of stuff in the US, but they've monitored elections in Europe, South America, and elsewhere. And they are constantly developing tools and things. And I'm going to share with you a document with some links to some of their tools. They've got a really great text messaging program, but I'll talk more about that. Just some definitions. Disinformation is when people intentionally create false or misleading information to make money, really to have political influence, or maliciously cause trouble or harm. Oftentimes those things may have a grain of truth to them. And we call misinformation when people share that disinformation because they didn't realize it's false or misleading. Sometimes they think they're helping. And I've got some, one specific example of this in this presentation. And then there's when people actually are sharing genuine information with an intent to cause harm, like they might get somebody's personal information and put it out there on the web, hoping that people will contact them, show up at their home, which unfortunately does happen. We're going to talk a lot about the first two. It's important to look at the different kinds of disinformation out there. There's satire or parody, which is meant to be funny, but a lot of people actually believe those things. I've got an example. Making false connections between things. There's just misleading content where you are taking a grain of truth and making it into something else, putting something in a false context, using, say, federal numbers to represent something at a state level. There's imposter content when people are trying to say be a news site, or even I have a friend whose Twitter account was hijacked at the beginning of the year. Actually, people created an account that looked just like hers and was one digit off from what it had added a 1 to her name. It's really important to be aware and look for those things. Manipulated content, like when people slow down the Nancy Pelosi video or use a photo that's false, which really falls into more fabricated content. But, any of us can be taken in. I saw this balloon thing back in May from a site at something that calls itself the City and County of Denver. And this is actually, I realized a little later, this is a parody site. Although I really love to celebrate all the brave men and women who share coronavirus hoaxes. We're inviting the Heen family to do the next flyover in Colorado. And I certainly remember the balloon boy hoax. And I thought from the get-go, this is not real. But this is from a parody site. And I have seen other people also be taken in by parody sites. So always check to see the about page. Do they say parody on their Twitter account? Because often these sites will say that. Making a false connection, and even this is an example from the Trump rally in Tulsa, and a lot of sites shared this photo. It is not of Tulsa. It is of Chicago. And, it just, it was pretty misleading. It's pretty, you know, I have a way that you can check for photos. You know, sometimes it can be a real thing. There's that grain of truth, but people are talking about, you know, they're raising suspicion and making misleading conclusions about this content. And, you know, this is somebody in, I think in Montrose County, in a group there, shared saying that this is how voter fraud happens, because the primary ballot envelopes are color coded and they're separating it in a way. And that's just not true. Every county does do balloting differently. And some counties do use color codes, like for a ballot that needs to have an ID with it, or for another reason, for sorting purposes. So, you know, it's useful to get the facts. And I have some sites that I can share with you. You know, there are a lot of websites and web pages sort of purporting to be news sites, and really they're partisan vehicles. Check out the pages. Are there real people named? You know, they make these accusations about people that suit their political purposes. And when you see that sort of thing, when there's only one side of the story, that's a good indicator that that site is not actually a news site. You know, sometimes people manipulate or, you know, fabricated, content. I'm not sure that this is that exactly, but, you know, this is a person making accusations in a closed group, I should note, that I belong to, and trying to draw these conclusions that somebody's going to be able to shred your ballot. And, you know, Colorado has, I think we're going to have like 350 drop boxes or more. Maybe it's 360 some in the state. They have video cameras on them at all times. They're very secure. They're supposed to be emptied at least every 24 hours. But, you know, people really want to draw these conclusions that something terrible is going to happen. You know, sometimes there are things that are just plain wrong. And a Grand Junction TV station, and this is irresponsibility by actual news media, they reported that a new sorting machine had been thrown out at the local post office. And they got this information and maybe a picture from a viewer. And they called, but the office didn't respond, so they just ran a story. And the story took off, except that it was later, like I saw a state lawmaker share it, was when I saw it, and I clicked on it, and the story had been updated to say that the machine was actually a used machine that had come from another city, and they couldn't get it to work. It couldn't be repaired. And so, yeah, they threw it out because it didn't work. But this became like Newsweek, I believe, did a story on it. And, you know, like, here's a post that this is just one of many posts, you know, that has 177 shares on Facebook. And people, it's really important to click those links. And I know I've seen, and sometimes these headlines on these stories never get changed, because I know a friend shared something about how mask wearing wasn't effective. And I clicked on this story and it had been updated, and it said something entirely different now, and said this original story has been, the original info has been disproven. And I said, hey, you know, that isn't, you should click on the link. And she removed it. And sometimes you can do things like that, but really click on the links before you share them. You know, there are things we call keyword squatting, where people are trying to like take one thing and make it into something else. And I believe, you know, Save the Children is a big example of this these days, that has been sort of a program of the Gates Foundation. And now people are using Save Our Children as a hashtag. There are Facebook groups. I believe that a Denver group is trying to do another rally. These things haven't had good turnout here, but the reality is this is something that has been promoted by QAnon in their quest to say that celebrities are killing children and drinking their blood, or just outrageous things that aren't actually happening. Again, there is some grains of truth here. Child trafficking does happen. Some of the information I've seen shared by these groups about the number of missing children is years old and no longer accurate. And one of the things that's never mentioned in these groups is that typically children who have gone missing because family members, it's a custodial dispute. Family members have taken them away from another family member. And not all of these children are being trafficked. Trafficking is a serious problem, but some of the people behind this movement are trying to make this something that it is not, and something that's political, quite frankly. It isn't just in social media. I collect mailers, and I've got in my Google Doc, I've got my email several places. I love to see people's campaign mailers, be they from the, any candidate or the outside groups. And these are both mailers from the outside groups. This mailer about the Senate District 27 in Centennial, I wrote about this contest today, and the candidate, Suzanne Sterrett, has actually filed a criminal complaint saying that the information in this mailer is false. And we'll see where that goes. I don't think I've ever seen anybody. There is a law prohibiting false information from being shared in this kind of communication, but I don't know that I've ever seen anyone successfully use it. The other mailer is from the Colorado Republican Party, and it insinuates that, it does say Hickenlooper set these criminals free, commuted, or gave them a reprieve. Two of those men are now free. One of them had actually been set free accidentally, and he actually he didn't commute his sentence. He pardoned him because he was a Cuban immigrant and ICE was trying to deport him. And he had been in this country when he was accidentally released, and it was something about a robbery. He had not, he was free for like 6 years and married and had a family and had a job before this was found out. And a judge actually later he was put back in prison, and a judge released him and said the original sentence was too long. 3 of these guys are still in jail. So, it's a little bit misleading. And that is a stock photo that has Hickenlooper's head stuck onto it. Photoshop. So what can you do? As a journalist, I do these things. And you, as a citizen, just trying to improve our democracy, it's so important that everybody votes, but we vote based on facts. So focus on facts, do research, click on the link, Google around some. Look for news media outlets are doing debunks, they're doing Q&As. They're providing all this information. I know, the Colorado News Collaborative is trying to put together a lot of information about how to vote, answering people's questions about this, and all sorts of other newspapers and TV stations and Colorado Public Radio and KUNC everybody out there is trying to provide good information. And you can go to those sources and get some of those information, some of that good information. One of the things that's important in trying to debunk these things is not to repeat falsehoods. Instead, focus on the facts. Like if you decide you're going to post, you've seen a lot of people share some bad info, find the good info and just post that. Don't mention the bad info, because that just reinforces people's thinking. Oh, now they've seen the bad info again. You know, keep the content that you share pretty simple. You know, maybe it's a visual or a graphic. You know, I'm doing a Q&A about voting and mail ballots and how ballots are counted. And it's just really a quick, simple, you could like search within that Q&A for the words you're looking for. The other thing that's important is don't talk down to your audience or your friends and family when you're trying to have a conversation about this information, because that just makes them dig in all the more. You know, again, focus on the facts. Google, look for news and academic sources. 10i.com is a great way. You can insert a photo into there and download it, and it'll search and you'll find how long that photo has been around if it's not original. I know when there were early on back in April, it seems so long ago, there were these Reopen Colorado protests that were a big deal at the state capitol, and the groups that were promoting those on Facebook originally were using. I just find this so amusing. I finally used 10i. They're using photos from the 2010 Civic Center Park 420 marijuana rally, which seemed odd to me. But you can then say, hey, I think that picture is from over here. You know, I've got some suggestions here, and I've got them in this Google Doc that I'm hoping we'll share in the notes section. First Draft has some great research. They've got a lot of articles about the psychology of misinformation, that sort of thing. Snopes has been around. I remember using them after 9/11 when so many rumors were spreading about what had happened then. And they've been around for a while and have do a pretty broad fact check. PolitiFact focuses on politics out of the Poynter Institute and the Tampa Bay Times, but they've been around since I think before 2008, and they do really good work. Fact Check is a nonprofit that does fact checking, and of course the Washington Post fact checker awards the Pinocchios. But those are some good resources to go out, and you might not even, like I said, you might not want to even talk to somebody about this. You might just see a lot of these things and share one of these fact checks on social, if that's where you're at. And share the simplest thing you can find. One of the things I've been trying to do a lot is I'm working on a voter Q&A, and the Longmont leader has run the first one. I've been updating it weekly, and it's just, how do I know if I'm registered to vote? What if I change my name? Do you need to fill out this form? How long do I have to register? When will I get my ballot? All sorts of things like that. And I feel like that is the sort of thing that is, if you can find that sort of content and share it with others, that's a good idea. Really, really avoid ridicule or derogatory comments. You don't want to threaten a person's worldview. You want to share, sometimes it's maybe you're sharing your worldview, but using loaded words, and this is a terrible example, some terrible headlines, dumb, wild claims, absolutely insane, bizarre conspiracy theory. I mean, I saw somebody sharing a Wired article the other day, maybe it was yesterday, I don't know, but it had a terrible headline on it. It was really insulting to people. And that's what people see. And, it's good. We need to have a conversation that's more civil than what these headlines have. Try to think about the questions that your debunk might surface. Provide an explanation, be transparent in your work. If you find something that talks about where the origin of a story, of where a rumor came from, that can be really valuable. But often there's a grain of truth in these things, and it's important to be able to disconnect the grain of truth from what's false. This is an example of thinking about what somebody's motivation is, and giving context on profit and motivation. This is an Anchorage Daily News article that's pointing out that, the nation's oldest anti-vaccine advocacy group is primarily it's being funded by somebody who's making a lot of money selling natural health products. And I've done some reporting on anti-vaccine efforts before, and there chiropractors are very involved in this as well. Some of the biggest, most followed Facebook pages in the anti-vaccine movement are from chiropractors. Again, share the simplest. That slide shouldn't be there. Sorry about that. Maybe I'm, make sure you're sharing accurate information on social media. Share the debunks on social media. Penn America has some great resources on talking to people. And, they talk about don't single people out necessarily. Maybe have a private conversation, send a private message to somebody. Hey, did you know that doesn't look right? And again, don't talk down to your audience. And you can contact me. I want to go into my Google Doc here for a second. You can sign up for the First Draft newsletter, which is a really good thing. And also on that page I've linked to there's a 2-week text message course that they do a really good job of. And they send you a text message every day at the time you want. And it just gives you a little tip and examples. And you can actually click on more information. They've got some videos and things like that. These Penn America resources are really, really great. And I've just hit on a few of them, but I feel like, think about the perspective of the person who shared the story. People have reasons for why they believe what they believe. And, you want to avoid escalation. At some point, we're not going to be successful in changing people's minds. People have different ideas. And so it's important to know when to give up, and that you're not going to change that person's mind. And maybe you say, no, let's no longer discuss this topic with each other and just move on. The mailers that I showed you, I have a site called Follow the Message, and I get people. I'm a little bit behind on posting things because I've got some things for some other contests, but I did a lot of stuff during if you're from Weld County, during the Weld County primaries, which were really, really highly contested. And I've got a lot of these mailers here about, that people send out about different candidates. And I go in and I talk about who sent the mailer, Leading Colorado Forward. It's targeting Kevin Priola. He's a Republican he's an incumbent in Senate District 25. And this mailer says that he voted against making healthcare more affordable. And I mentioned that in this particular mailer, one of the votes occurred 9 years ago. That he's considered a moderate and isn't getting a lot. I need to change that because his opponent is being attacked by outside groups. But Leading Colorado Forward is a state super PAC that works to elect Democrats. And they get a lot of money from a nonprofit called America Votes. New Belgium Brewery founder has donated to them, as have Noble Energy, Extraction Oil and Gas, United Healthcare. So if you have those mailers, I would love you to send them to me. And I have some other things in this document, but I want to stop sharing and hear whether you have questions or things to say.
That's perfect timing because we just got a question here. It
Great.
says, can you suggest some neutral media sites that are less likely to immediately raise the hackles of someone who disagrees with me politically?
That's a good question. And because people have become so polarized, they think that certain media is just a certain way. But I think your local news, for the most part, I'd really suggest sharing information from local news and from TV. I feel like the TV stations in the Denver metro, 9 News, the Denver Channel, and Channel 4, they all have a lot of good information. They have some great they do great fact checking of TV ads, and they are making so much money on TV ads. I also track that information too. I mean, I haven't done the totals yet, but it's like $100 million worth of political ads probably this year at least. But they do some great fact checking. And I think that, sharing, if they just think that Fox News is the bomb, though, that's going to be difficult. But I think if you look around enough, even sometimes you see, trying to remember, there are some conservative publications that are, and some liberal ones that are not necessarily, don't always go along with things. The Wall Street Journal is a good publication to look at. Trying to think, I like public radio because I feel like for the most part they're pretty straightforward, and they talk to a lot of different people, and it's from all perspectives, and it's interesting to listen to. I hope that helps some. And I'd be looking for individual bits and pieces of news from different sources. If there's a particular topic that somebody is really, really into, I would be looking for different sources that you can share information with them. And it's good just to say, one of the things that Penn, I think, suggests is saying, wow, where did you hear that? What's your source for that? And asking them to share a link, and then saying, wow, well, I did some research and I found this. You might want to read it, and leave it at that and see what happens. Any other questions? I'd be good if people wanted to turn on their audio and just talk. Do people ever really change their minds? That's a really good question. And, the research that I'm seeing, the polling out there are very few people who are undecided in this election. And I think that you're going to see the focus be more on getting people out to vote on either side. At this point, I think it's really hard to get people to change their minds. And I've seen several stories in the past week about people whose friends have gone like down that QAnon thing, and they're just insistent upon it. And Farhad Manjoo's book starts out with a description about a woman who had HIV and insisted that you didn't need to take drugs to cure HIV or to prevent you from getting AIDS. And one of her children died of AIDS, and so did she eventually. But she was this big celebrity in that realm. So, sometimes people just have things that they want to believe, and it's really hard to change their minds. But maybe I think just sharing information and saying, well, this is the science of this over here, and this has been the outcome, can be helpful. I think that people kind of have their sides drawn, and I think it's disappointing because it makes a lot of people reluctant to really have conversations about these issues, because people are so adamant about that their side is correct. I have to tell you, I love watch. I watch the news on the internet where I do everything, but I love watching people's, like you can Google 9 News truth tests. KDVR does some pretty good ones too. And Sean Boyd at Channel 4, watching these info about these ads, like it's just pretty amusing to see, because these ads are pretty creative. Although nobody here has compared themselves to Attila the Hun as one candidate who's actually an appointed U.S. Senator in Georgia, has an ad in which it said that she is to the right of Attila the Hun. So if you want to Google that, it's amazing to watch. First Draft is like I said, it's an international program, and it's led by an academic, Claire Wardle, who has a PhD in examining these sorts of things. And there are a lot of people out there who are looking at this sort of response. They pretty much focus on elections and politics, although we started our fellowships in February, and they go through the end of the year. There's 4 other fellows from more competitive states like Ohio, Florida, Michigan, and Wisconsin. But we were in New York for a training, and then they canceled it because of the virus. It was in early March, and we were originally really focused on the election, and we really had to shift gears toward COVID and coronavirus because so much misinformation was spreading through that. And you've seen just this steady from, misinformation about coronavirus, which is difficult. This is something that really hasn't happened before. It's an all new sort of virus, and you just didn't have enough information about it at the beginning. The deaths have slowed because I think that the medical community has found better ways of treating it. And I think that it's not spreading as quickly in some places, but, initially you didn't know enough about it. And that's a place, when there's a void in the information system, when you don't know enough, that's when rumors really take hold. Vote Smart, Real Clear Politics, Ballotpedia. I love Ballotpedia. They're really great. They've got a lot of great information. And if you're into campaign finance, I do a lot of different things. I also do some editing for opensecrets.org, which does federal campaign finance data. And I also have a site, if you were into numbers, I don't know if you're into like numbers and campaign finance, I have a site called followthemoneyco.com where I take the info from Tracer and I present it in a different way. You might have to know a little SQL type stuff, but it's okay. So do other countries have this? I think yes, other countries do have trouble with political divisiveness and disinformation. And it's not just the 2-party system. I mean, other countries have these issues too. It's pretty funny because this reminds me that for some reason, I'm not sure how this happened, but in early March, there were some people visiting from Moldavia, and they wanted to talk with a journalist about information and disinformation. And they're over there next to Ukraine and Russia, and they see these problems too. And I think they have a multi-party system. I could be wrong about that, but they see meddling from Russia and from Ukraine, and they're very energy dependent on both of those countries. This is not just a problem here. I have a friend who's from Brazil, and when they were doing their elections, one of the things among people of color or people of different nationalities, they use the WhatsApp a lot, another Facebook product. And she was seeing her family in Brazil just share all this stuff that was just wrong. And she finally had to leave the family group. She would say, but that's not true, and show them things. And I think that this sort of stuff has spread, and it's really hard once it starts spreading, especially in these closed groups. I'm in some closed groups in Colorado, and it's just very interesting to see the sort of things that people are sharing and saying. Vote Smart is another really good resource. Other questions or comments? I mean, you could unmute yourself.
Hi, Sandra.
Hi.
It's very interesting because I'm right now reading a book on Dwight D. Eisenhower, and it the even back in the 50s, the political strife that was going on at that time is just so similar to what we're dealing with now. And he was a middle of the road guy, but he was getting assaulted from both sides, even though he was middle of the road. And it just, when I'm reading it, I'm just thinking, wow, it could be today. And you know, us humans don't really change much.
Yeah, and I think it's just the velocity. This is one of the things about Farhad Manjoo's book. He mentions that the velocity of the internet allows these things to spread much more quickly. And I think that actually the change in technology and the sort of things, the changes it's brought in our world have sort of solidified the division among people. I mean, I think part of there's an undercurrent of people are having a hard time dealing with the sort of change that's come through technology. But yeah, I recently read Eric Larson's book about Churchill, which is just a great read. His first year in office, and similar things. It's like he took over at a time when the British government was trying to decide, are you going to go in with Hitler or not? And that's a really, it's just a wild thing to read. It's a great book. Also, I think it fascinates me to see these books that are written now, when a lot has been written about Churchill, but I feel like maybe the difference is that Eric Larson and then some other people that I've read doing that sort of history work. Now people feel more comfortable sharing like these really insider gossipy tidbits, because this has a ton of gossipy tidbits about various people's personal lives. Yeah, thanks for that link to his book. It's still a relevant read today. It's interesting because his column in the New York Times today is that he started watching Walter Cronkite from decades ago, and I think that I think that's part of his point, is that you go back. I saw somebody post the other day that this was the most upheaval she'd seen since 1968, and to date myself, I was 10 then, and I remember about the Vietnam War and how I felt about that, but I don't remember much about, and I remember the assassinations, but I don't remember much about the whole milieu back then. And my parents are no longer here to tell me what I wonder, what they think, because they were pretty engaged. And, it's distressing to see, but it's also we are a democracy and we all get to have a say. And it's important for us to encourage our friends and family members and others in our community to help them get out there and vote and have a say, and to make that choice an informed one by using a lot of these resources.
Can you tell us, Sandra, how you're going to say about the how you can tell if a photo has been doctored, or if, or
you know, let me share my screen and see if I can and do that. That is I love to do this. Let's see here. Yeah. So this is 10i, is it what it's called? And you can upload a photo. This could be, no, go to the desktop. I'm about to scroll through my crazy pictures here. Let's just use that one and see what it comes up with. So I don't get any results for that, but oh, wait, I can find that in a different spot. Just to reveal what a mess this is. Yeah. This is a good example because the person who sent this to me had actually done this. And here you go. Stock Adobe, iStock photo, Dreams Times. You know, I guess it's just designed so you can stick somebody else's head on there. But this is a real useful tool, because when you see somebody use like that image of Chicago, I mean, I saw that image and thought, I'm pretty sure this is not Oklahoma. I would have a hard time having that many people there. But that is a super tool, and I guess I should go back and share this again and try to point out there's actually I have to move my screen around to see it. There's actually a is this it? This is a Revi reverse image search. That's a plugin for Chrome. So if you went to a page, I don't know, does that page exist anymore? I don't think it does. If you went to a page, you'd be able to go up and with the photo, let's just look at Twitter. So I could go up here, I think, and oh, okay. So I can right click this and say, I want to do a reverse image search. And it's going to open 10i. And this is not going to come up with anything because this is a photo from Andrew Hyde, and you know, clearly that is of his cool bike ride today and his cool bike. That's cool. So I think that's a super useful tool. I also have installed, oops. There are a lot of plugins that you can use. Is that one? No. NewsGuard. I use that and it will show me whether something is considered a reputable source. And we will just look at Facebook. And it has like a green or a red sort of thing at when people are sharing links. This could be a nightmare too, but I'm a pretty open book. I'm wearing a dress today, even though you can't tell. And I posted a picture to Twitter already. At least they're asking me if I've registered to vote in Colorado on Insta the other night. They were asking me if I wanted to register to vote in Texas. Yikes. My internet gets so slow when this is. All right, my friend Sarah hurt her ankle. Maybe I'm not going to get, well, let's try a Google search. You see that I'm getting a little green check mark next to those things. So that's another plugin.
We also have a question about deepfakes.
I think that we've talked about that some at First Draft, and there's actually Claire did this thing for the New York Times a while ago, and I mean I'll add that to the Google Doc because it's pretty funny. It's a video in which she basically transforms from Adele to Claire, like Adele the singer, and Claire is British. And I think the concern is more with cheap fakes, Claire would say, like that Nancy Pelosi video slowed down, or substituting Joe Biden in for this super old interview that was totally with someone else. At the Carrie Belfonte, I can't remember. I mean, I think you're seeing more of it's not so much the deep fakes as the cheap fakes where people are just mashing stuff together to take things out of context and really to just create falsehoods and false context of something. And I think that's a concern. I feel like these things get called out fairly quickly, often by journalists who might have been at that event or other people, but it's often been shared millions of times because they take off. And I think it's important to say, even if you say it privately, sometimes I say these things publicly, hey, that thing's not true. And I feel like social media is not doing a great job of monitoring these things. Things take off so quickly. I don't know how you not be fooled by them. The other thing is, if it seems incredible, I do a lot of Googling before sharing something that seems incredible, because often things that seem incredible there's a reason for that. So any other questions or answers? I loved reading The Splendid and the Vile, and I highly recommend it.
Well, if there are no further questions, I want to say thank you so much, Sandra, for joining us tonight and giving us a lot of great tools to use. Wow, going forward in the future, not just for this election, but just dealing with the misinformation that's out there in all sorts of areas. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
Thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it.
Oh,
It's
you
been
bet.
fun to chat with you. Thank you.
Thanks a bunch. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Bye-bye.
Bye.